Origin Jazz, Home Reaction. This is Syria, Israel, Ukraine, a new decade of war. But Kurzgesagt in a nutshell. Okay, I guess Kurzgesagt making like a current geopolitics / war video. Why not? I think he has done that in the past, at least one or two, or I'm pretty sure he has done that. Yeah, as far as a new decade of war goes, yeah, it is a new decade of war, right? Like, in a way, like, if you think about it, since World War II, things were relatively calm. It's basically because of Ukraine thing, let's be honest, because Middle East was always chaotic, right? There's always some Syrian war, right? Some war here and there. There's always Middle Eastern war, right? What was it like? What was the Hillary Clinton one where people just say like Benghazi, right? So past multiple years, if you just go back, there's always a war. There's always some war / genocide happening somewhere in some continent. But the Europe thing is big because Ukraine-Russia thing, that has never happened. And why you say like, okay, if that's the case, then it's just one war. Why would that be the issue? The problem with that is war in like a major continent, or like not major continent, war in like a developed continent and like former / current major power. That is a big deal. Russia being at war with Ukraine, destabilizing Europe a bit, like that has never happened. Europe has always been instrumental when it comes to war, war and like peace, war, everything, right? So if Europe is at war, that is like people start to sweat, right? Because all world wars is basically Europe's war that's spilled out everywhere else. So I don't know. China-Taiwan thing, if that surges up, North Korea destroyed bridges in between North Korea and South Korea, which is like another, like there's a new axis type is forming, right? Israel-Iran thing might happen. Now, that is also a big thing because, again, like there have been conflict in the past, but not direct war, so that could happen. Hasn't happened yet, so we're in the kind of the middle of a maybe not. But yeah, let's see what Kurzgesagt have to say about this. It's going to be interesting.
We asked if war was over. Based on long-term trends in the last century, it seemed violent conflict was on the decline and the world more peaceful than ever. Our video began with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the war between Hamas and Israel. And, well, a decade later, we could start this video exactly the same way. But is the world as a whole more violent today?
Ukraine war was very specific 10 years ago when it comes to Crimea. It was one region. Usually when big powers or like big countries thinks about war, this is what they fear, like somebody taking over a small area of their country. Full-scale invasion, that was like, oh, come on, that would never happen. So that was a big difference this time. And that's somewhat of a trend. Because if this can happen, everybody else is going to get ideas. And like, nobody else is first now because Russia was first. So it's much easier for other people to, I'm going to do war. I'm going to imply my geopolitics. I'm going to take either take away attention from home where people are getting pissed off about me or something or whatever, but I can do war and everything goes away. Like there's many elements. People can use war as a tool.
In a nutshell, we made 7 claims in 2014. 1. We have less conflict deaths than ever. 2. There were almost no more wars between countries. 3. Democracies don't fight each other. 4. Borders are mostly fixed. 5. Most conflicts are in areas that were under foreign control either by colonial states or Soviet dictatorships. 6. More civil wars are ending by diplomacy. 7. We're in the most peaceful period of history. So, let's see how our video has held up. First, let's get an overview of conflicts in the last decade. Some of the deadliest conflicts that were glowing hot in 2014 have since ended or significantly cooled down. The war in Afghanistan ended with the victory of the Taliban. While the civil wars in Yemen and Libya are all still ongoing, they turned mostly into stalemates. The proto-state of ISIS in Iraq and Syria has been wiped out. And, breaking news, the rebels just won the war in Syria last week. The extremely destructive civil war in South Sudan ended in a fragile peace agreement despite violence still flaring up in the devastated young country. Sadly, the last decade saw a bunch of new conflicts erupt, or old unresolved issues turn violent. One of the main claims of our video 10 years ago was that wars today are not between countries, and this is still largely true. Civil wars are by far the most common type of state-based conflict in the world. We'd wager that most...
I think it's mostly like how you see it, right? A lot of Europe's colonialism is kind of at stake, not at stake, it's at effect. When you see like these conflicts between like conflicted areas are not really countries. That's because of like past BS. Technically countries are at war, but the countries in Africa, countries in Middle East, people just like, hey, that happens all the time. European country, people always like, oh, that would never happen. That's like one of the lines that would never cross, which it did. And it makes sense because Europeans were the colonizers, so like they still hold power. Technically, they're like one of the richest countries of the planet. Apart from America, is like a lot of like European things, right? China is obviously at top, but like European countries are generally just richer and powerful military-wise, right? And Europe is so jam-packed together. If the war happens, it's just very chaotic and it's like a wildfire. So Russia-Ukraine thing is going to cause a lot of destabilization of the past, right? Because Europe was always the issue, like 1,000 years, like there's always some war for some reason. That's why after World War II, things really changed, right? Where everybody's just like, everybody calm down. Okay, European Union, everybody's part of the union, everybody's this, right? So Russia-Ukraine thing happens, like people get pissed off. Now, what if like Russia attacks something else? What if like this and that? What if Europe is back to war? If Europe is at the war, everybody's basically going to start doing the war thing. So that's why Russia-Ukraine thing kind of changed the stake a bit.
Most of you have never heard about one of the deadliest civil wars in decades, the 2020 Tigray War in Ethiopia. It ended in 2022 with the victory of the Ethiopian and Eritrean government forces against...
This is what I was talking about, like genocides and things. There were like a lot of fucked up things were happening in Africa, right?
...rebel groups. Exact death tolls are unknown, but they may exceed 500,000, mostly civilians. Aside from Tigray, a number of new civil wars have broken out since 2014. Although new is a bit misleading since the underlying issues were brooding at a smaller scale for a long time. The deadliest have been the Sudan Civil War, the Civil War in Yemen, and the Civil War in Myanmar. Multiple nations in Africa like Mali, Nigeria, Somalia, Burkina Faso and Mozambique are suffering from Islamist insurgencies that destabilize countries and have cost tens of thousands of civilian lives. Lastly, there are nearly 60 smaller, unresolved state-based conflicts around the world, many going on for decades, that are smouldering but have a relatively low death toll in comparison. Maybe the worst news is that we've been seeing interstate wars again. There was the short-lived 2020 war between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which redrew contested borders. Then there's the latest war between Israel and Hamas that turned into a regional crisis. What is certainly the most disturbing new development is the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia. It's the first large-scale interstate war in 20 years, and the first war since World War II where a major power is trying to conquer territory and to subjugate another state. It followed an 8-year conflict that started with the 2014 Russian annexation of Crimea and the war in the Donbass. Exact casualty rates for the war since 2022 are hard to verify, but they go as high as hundreds of thousands. Okay, so what about our 2014?
Yeah, so there has been war like Russia, Georgia thing, like Iraq thing, right? Afghanistan has been going on for a long time. There are like a lot of internal conflict in, Africa and everywhere, Asia. Middle East is always destabilized. Like there's always some kind of conflict. There's Syria and many other places, like, Israel. There's always something pops up. Current Israel thing, Israel and like Gaza thing is like kind of like bigger. If you see how it happened, and what is like a background of it, right? There have been small conflict, but this is kind of bigger in a long time, so that's a problem. But that happened after Russia-Ukraine thing, so it's like a domino thing. Once major thing happened, people starts to get idea, right? Maybe we can do it too. Now, I don't know what forces are behind it, but yeah, that shit happens. This is why I'm afraid of like China-Taiwan thing might slowly spur up. North Korea, South Korea thing definitely might spur up, and it was like red alert level shit was happening very recently, where they destroyed bridges and things. But yeah, the Russia-Ukraine thing is like because of the geopolitics, because of the Europe itself, it's different than other wars, right? Because it's Europe, right? That shit doesn't happen. And it did happen since World War II, so it's a big deal.
Claims. If we add up the numbers, we see a few things. Roughly between 2004 and 2014, there were about 350,000 deaths from state-based conflicts worldwide. They were going down from 2014 to 2019 and then rose sharply in 2021. In total, from 2014 to 2024, we saw about 1.2 million deaths. If we include all violent conflicts like the Mexican drug war, the number rises to 1.5 million, 3 times higher than the previous decade. Actually, 2022 had the highest death toll from violent conflict since the Rwandan genocide in 1994. The Tigray War and the war in Ukraine alone were responsible for the majority of lives lost, as both wars involved armies of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, sometimes thrown against entrenched positions in human wave attacks. So, the last 3 years have been unusually violent. But if we zoom out a bit more, we can put those numbers into perspective. A terrible thing, but nowhere near how...
I'm not sure about this, man. Right? I mean, you add like drug war. It's a war for the sake of saying war. What do we mean by war? War is usually between two big countries or any countries, right? Two countries, right? That is a proper war. Like, of course, there are bad elements everywhere. There is going to be conflict, right? You can't really change that. But like, we are talking about like geopolitics here. Like, geopolitics is just a word people are geopolitics. But that is basically everything, right? So when two countries go to war, that's a proper war. That's a failure of geopolitics right there. And that's what happened with Russia-Ukraine thing. Israel-Gaza thing also the similar way, right? And like there is potential war in the future because of Russia-Ukraine thing, because of Russia's alliances, American alliances. Again, this is like World War I level shit is happening where alliances are forming and creating direct two sides. Economical driver is the only thing that is left to deter things. Like if China-Taiwan thing happens, China's going to be hit up really badly because China still needs America. Doesn't matter how much anyone thinks, right? Even though China is becoming more like self-sustained, it's going to be hit. Like nobody want to not live in luxury, right? China doesn't want its $20 trillion economy tank, just like anybody else. So maybe two big countries like China, maybe nothing will happen. But North Korea, South Korea thing might definitely happen because North Korea might be like, I have nothing to lose type of way, right? And I have Russia to back me or some shit because Russia is already at conflict. So this is geopolitical war, right? Not wars as in like drug war or like internal civil war, and like those are different wars.
Bad it can get when the world goes to war. In the grand scheme of things, we are still living in relatively peaceful times. But the next decade will show if the trend will reverse or if the last few years were an anomaly. Unfortunately, there have been proper wars between states again, so our prediction on wars between countries didn't hold up. What is as true today as in 2014 is that almost all armed conflicts in the world are in countries that were under foreign occupation in the 20th century, either by colonialism or by the expansive Soviet dictatorship. Ethnic groups were split apart or forced together by arbitrary borders, resources unequally distributed, or power vacuums created, which led to conflicts that are in many cases still unresolved. There have also been no wars between democracies who seem uniquely unwilling to fight each other. So compared to the last century, it's still true that war between nations is still an exception.
Wait a minute, isn't Russia technically a democracy right now after Soviet Union? They have voting and everything. Technically, I'm talking about technically here. And so is Ukraine. So doesn't that technically make two democratic countries fighting? I don't know. But yeah, democratic countries are usually doing well, right? Like, and if like some democratic country is not doing well, they're kind of newer, at least newer to democracy, and they're like hopes in the future. I mean, if people are in power, people like money, people like to live in luxury, people will do business with each other. Usually that leads to global economy. Why would you want to fuck with anybody else that would hit your own money, right? So democracy usually doesn't have a need to go to war with anyone. It's usually like some kind of a dictatorship or like imperialism, like anything like that. Usually have like ambitions beyond their own border. So yeah, democracy's war is kind of like a... But yeah, I don't know. China, if they go to war, like that would change a bit because that would be too big, and USA would be involved directly, right? North Korea, South Korea thing, I think like Japan will get involved, and so is USA. I don't know. So yeah, next decade might look very different. The point is, now we depend on diplomats. Proper good diplomats that you don't hear about. I'm not, as soon as I say people, those politicians, I'm not talking about the politicians you hear about TV. I'm talking about the people in the background that you never hear of and never will. who actually do proper work, right? So it's all dependent on them now, like how things go about.
Rather than the rule. On the other hand, we see fewer civil wars end by diplomacy. Instead, there's an increase in either victories or stalemates. These often aren't permanent resolutions to the conflict, only pauses in the fighting, because the underlying causes haven't been solved. For our claim about borders, we can see that most international borders in the world still hold up and are not challenged, but there are still a few dozen territorial disputes in the world, most of them in Africa and Asia. And some are getting hotter, like the border clash between India and China over Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh. China's claim to Taiwan, or Venezuela threatening to annex part of Guyana's oil-rich province Essequibo. One thing that makes wars so deadly is that they're often supported by external powers. Many countries are providing support or arming up different sides or factions, like the competition between Saudi Arabia and Iran for hegemony, with Iran being the main supporter for the Houthis, Hezbollah or Hamas, or in the Ukrainian war, with the West supporting Ukraine, while China, Iran and North Korea support Russia. But it's not...
Kurzgesagt trying to make sure people don't get pissed off. Is it the same, the West supporting Ukraine then? Is it really the same? West didn't directly support Ukraine, but West is defending, like helping defend Ukraine. Like it's different, isn't it? Like Ukraine got under attack, Ukraine asked for help, people are helping, right? It's very different to support somebody attacking, right? Or like support somebody in a way that they, conflict just rises up, right? So there are many big powers, all big powers probably, somehow working in the background to keep the wars going in certain places like Middle East and others, right? It's a geopolitics, it's like business to them, which is like fucked up when you hear about it, but it's geopolitics for them, right? But when it comes to Ukraine or something, Ukraine is being supported because first of all, like European countries have interest in that. If Ukraine falls, what if they come after Poland? Poland don't need that shit. It's been too much, right? But Poland like, oh, not this time. Like it's been enough, right? Like 3-4 times they've been consumed. Now it's like enough. Germany is already, of course, is going to be scared. Like, oh, we're Germany. Like, okay, past things might be too strong. Let's just say for them. So like having flashbacks or something. They're like, oh, we did a lot of shit in World War I, World War II. What if somebody uses that to justify attacking us? They're always gonna think like that. So as soon as this shit happened, like Germany started to like arm themselves up. Like makes sense. That's the thing. Destabilizing Europe means everybody gets scared and everybody arms up. That's why it's different.
Not just countries. External powers keeping conflicts alive can also be Islamist groups like ISIS or criminal networks, or even local elites that benefit from their own country being torn apart and effectively prevent conflicts from ending. The end of the rules-based world. There's a lot of debate among experts about what factors make the world more or less peaceful, but there are no easy answers. One of the major reasons the world has seen less conflict was that after the end of the Cold War, many countries expected a sort of rules-based world order, and for a time, this worked somewhat. But things have been changing.
It still works, man. If you have a stable democracy, and if you have a strong democracy, on top of that, you have a strong military to defend it, you're probably going to be fine, right? Now, India is in conflict with China and Pakistan, two countries that border. China is like Arunachal Pradesh, Pakistan obviously like with the Jammu Kashmir thing. Probably nothing going to happen there because India ain't a bitch, right? Like if you fight, even though China is powerful than India, India is still powerful, right? India can fight back, and especially with the geography, how it favors India, same thing like that. India-Pakistan is like an economical gap and power gap is too big. So again, like nothing's going to happen there either. So it doesn't benefit China or Pakistan to direct cause war with India. India is like more like pacifist type of country, it doesn't strike first ever. So it's not even case if India is going to attack. That never happens. So any major strong democratic country with strong military, there's going to be some like scuffles here and there, no major war. Problem with Ukraine was like they gave up nukes. Again, they couldn't have like managed the nukes or maintain it. But still, like if they develop like a stronger military and like some stronger thing and were like more prepared And I even know like US probably gave intelligence to Ukraine, like, okay, something's happening with Russia before all that happened, which I don't know if they take seriously or not. But yeah, like if Russia thought that, okay, Ukraine is strong enough, attacking them might take long, they might not have attacked, because initial strategy of Russia was this is gonna, this is gonna be over before it starts. In a week, we'll be singing like our songs or some shit in Kiev or something. That's what they thought. So if they just gave the thought like, okay, Ukraine is so strong, we can't just like win like that, so let's not attack, they might not have attacked. So strong democracy with strong military, that's what you need.
In the last few years, the world has become multipolar, with new alliances forming, and the idea of a rules-based world is being challenged. China's manufacturing capacity is now as big as the US and Europe's combined. With its massive economic development, a new super...
That's been the case for more than a decade, man. US's 40 trillion economy kind of, depends on China. Like US wouldn't have 40 trillion economy if China wasn't there. China wouldn't have 20 trillion economy if USA wasn't there. USA is the main core of things, who like supply technology and everything. Basically the center scientific hub of the planet. All the technology come from there, everything basically come from there. That's how overpowered the US is. No country has ever been this kind of overpowered. Not even Britain, not even Germany in its time. USA is that dominant today, right? People are like, oh, comment down, but that's just true, right? I'm not an American and I'm saying that, like, come on. So China basically like opened up its border, like lessened their communism a bit. CCP lessened its 1C, and like did open business, capitalism, did open business with America, and look at $20 trillion economy. And obviously they were always a powerhouse when it comes to manufacturing. That was the reason why it worked, right? 1.4 billion people. Of course that was going to happen.
Superpower has risen. It's common knowledge that the US spends more on its military than any place in the world, but this may no longer reflect the true balance of power. China...
See, everything has asterisks on top. Like, I'm pausing too much, but again, like spending thing. Like, what does that mean? Okay, US spends a lot of money, okay? Sure, like 37%. But a lot of tech comes from like the US, like planes, F-35s, and a lot of things like that. Well, other people just take a sneak peek and just develop their own, let's just say. So a lot of that 37% goes to R&D, right? And then they have money to develop something. But other thing, like let's just say China 12%, how accurate is that? First of all, it's a communistic country, which implies they can dictate prices a bit in their own country at least. China makes a lot of things in their own home, right? They have a lot of rare earth material in their own home. So something that costs something to USA might not cost the same for China. China might have like half the prices that US have to pay because it's just in their home, right? And that's the thing about communism, right? It's not, China is not full democracy. It's that it's communism. They can dictate a lot of things. For the good of the people, you can't charge that much price type of shit. So that 12% might as well be 25 or 30%, just like output wise.
In the world, but this may no longer reflect the true balance of power. China doesn't report all of its military spending like the US does, and it gets a lot more done with each equivalent dollar spent. Recent estimates trying to account for these differences tell us China's effective military budget is now a significant portion of the United States' budget. And with Russia breaking the taboo of launching the first war of conquest by a major power in almost 80 years, Europe has begun the process of rearming. It is slow because, well, Europe is slow, but it is happening.
Now you would think, yeah, fuck yeah, like Russia's not going to get to us, right? Europe is arming itself, we're going to defend ourselves. Human nature usually comes in the way. Yes, you're doing that to defend yourself, but the point is you are increasing military spending. That, however fucked up this might sound, that will go somewhere. If Russia-Ukraine war stops and you spend that much money in military, somebody will get some idea and like chances of conflict rises, even besides Russia and Ukraine. Spending in military that much, you need a stable military, obviously. But out of fear, if you invest too much in the military, like you'll want, what you say, like investment and like whatever you get back, right? So you would ask for that, like we invested this much in military, what now, right? US always had this problem in the past. That's why people are like, oh, US always does business by war. It's not about doing business by war. It's like they spend so much, like someone somewhere always gets an idea, like, okay, what are we doing with this? And to justify that, some kind of conflict, US always gets involved with.
We're in the transition to a multipolar world again, with different nations and alliances claiming spheres of power they want to dominate. In this climate, tensions and conflicts between states have been rising, even if most of them have not turned into wars yet. So, is war over? The clear answer is no. And the direction we're headed in doesn't seem great. But
is war over? There's never gonna be a day when war is over. It's gonna fall silent slowly. Like embers of the war will be there, and it will always be up and down, right? It can never be diminished completely because we are humans.
with all the gloom, it's also true that we are still in a peaceful period of world history and that deaths by war are still at historic lows. The world is at a crossroads. We'll do another update video in 2034. Let's all hope that Armenia...
Oh, wait a minute. We'll do another update in 2034. If you're alive, yeah, sure. If we are here, maybe cockroaches will watch it. There will be a channel called Kurzgesagt for cockroaches, and they'll make it and cockroaches will watch it. While our skeletons are like decaying in the ground because there's a nuclear fallout there.
Let's all hope we'll have better news for you then. Getting reliable...
Yeah, well, go to Orisa video page link, and from there support this channel. Yeah. There was a recent thing where Pakistan said something and somebody asked, like, I don't know, like Prime Minister of India or somebody, or like Foreign Minister, I don't know. And he just answered, our nuclear weapons are not for like Diwali fireworks or something, like made a joke like that. Basically, the point is, like, we still don't have a war between two nuclear powers. Now, a lot of countries, a lot of major countries have nuclear weapons. So that'll be a thing to see. Maybe deterrence still works, right? Maybe two nuclear power will never go to war. But if nuclear powers do go to war and somebody says, fuck it, let's just go to war, and nothing happens. Like nuclear weapons are just there and nobody use anything, not even for the warning. Deterrents are dead after that. Like either just discard that or use it. That's kind of shit. And using is never good. If you use nuke, we are all gonna die. So discard it at that point. Because if the deterrent, like when somebody, it's like, you know, like crossing a line, like something happened, no, nothing happened. The end, right? I don't know. So still, like, I still have hope in that way. Like nuclear powers will never go to war. Who the fuck knows though? Right, well, if you like my next one, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.